unchecked growth on a region that has finite resources. It's pretty much the environmental calamity of the entire planet. It's just everything is based on growth.
Welcome, Wild Ones. I'm Josh Schlossberg, host of the Green Root Podcast, the official podcast of Eco Integrity Alliance, where we're on a quest to uncover the roots of the ecological crisis. I'd like to welcome this week's guest, John Krieg. John C. Krieg is a landscape architect and environmental writer based in Southern California. He is known to like trees better than people. Join the club. His most recent offering is Our Environmental Awakening, a brief guide to surviving climate change. Welcome to the Green Root Podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Cool. Well, so we're going to talk a bit about drought, desert, the dry Southwest. That's something that's on people's mind pretty much wherever you're living these days. Dryness, I would say, at least in the West, but particularly in the Southwest, an already arid region. So, yeah, maybe just start with what's been your experience in that region that it informs your insight.
My biggest experience is people are not really too concerned with water conservation. They seem to think it's a limited resource. I just checked statistics. Lake Powell, that dams the Colorado River and provides water for Arizona, is at 25% capacity, as is Lake Mead, which is Hoover Dam and supplies Las Vegas. Yet you go to those cities and they're just growing. The cranes are everywhere. They're coming. Phoenix is talking about data centers. I just don't know where the water is going to come from. As a landscape architect, I have to submit plans, irrigation plans, and landscape plans to water agencies, Salt River Project, or here in outside of Palm Desert to Coachella Valley Water District, proving that I'm using water efficient plants. However, I see where golf and agriculture get a hall pass. I mean, the Coachella Valley, the Palm Springs area is famous for golf, and some of the courses are using reclaimed water, most are not. Agriculture is basically still flood irrigation. There's more efficient types of irrigation, drip, for one thing. It's just that it, we seem to take the brunt of it. The people are stubborn. Why anybody wants a lawn in the desert is beyond me, but they do. And I'm just I'm making some proposals. I think we should look at water conservation on the individual home basis. I'd like to see a dedicated drainage system for shower, tub, and washing machine water that's used with biodegradable soap that goes into a home dedicated cistern underground that could be used for fire sprinkler systems, that could be used for deck washing, uh, that can be used for all the things we wipe down with water, but we don't necessarily have to have pure water. That's expensive. One of my pet sayings is when it becomes too expensive not to do something, then we'll do it, which is a ripoff of what Senator Bernie Sanders says all the time. The wildfire situation is a part of the drought, and it just seems like California's burning. It's just burning. You know, I I have a story called After the Drought, which tries to imagine a 10-year drought, which is basically, we've been in that now, but under worse conditions. And then all of a sudden, things turn around and the rains come, and people that had moved out of a rural community move back in. And the thing is, it's like the coronavirus. Everybody was thankful for the reprieve, but not cognizant of what they do need to do to not let it happen again. They just went back to business as usual. Um, in that story, and this is kind of a takeoff on something I saw on Bill Maher in one of his new rule segments, one of his ending monologues, where he said, if we could take oil from the Great Lakes states and send it all the way down to Louisiana, why can't we take water from the hurricane ravaged Gulf Coast states and send it to the West? Now, that's very expensive. There'd be a lot of opposition, even from environmentalists. But the thing about water is when you have to have it, you have to have it. I see a lot of this response to climate change going to have to be compromised. We don't need Bitcoin to survive. We don't need data centers to survive. We need water to survive. And it just doesn't seem like anybody's getting it.
I appreciate your message. And I think, yeah, water is one of the biggest issues of our time. There are some folks who are trying to do messaging around rehydrating the West. There are clearly things we can do. There might be things we won't be able to do. But I'm wondering, are you familiar much with the work and travels of John Wesley Powell back
Yeah,
in the day? Do you want to tell folks a little bit about him? I mean, you don't have to have an encyclopedic knowledge of him. I can look up a little info, but
he was a I think it was a Civil War veteran that went on an expedition of the Colorado River. He was a man with one arm, and they went from the origins all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. Um, the purpose of his expedition was to determine if the river was navigable for ships, big paddle wheelers, and parts of it were, but in general, the river is just too rough. And he wrote about his travels on the Colorado River, which is known as the West's last watering hole. There's just no more. There's just no more water. I mean, this is it. This is what we have, and I just don't know where to go. For years I've been writing about let's have a constitutional amendment, pure air and clean water as a human right, at least in America, because the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act of the '70s just apparently don't go far enough. But if the Constitution is the law of the land, then I think it needs to be in the Constitution.
well, let's get back to the present in a second. But the reason I wanted to bring up John Powell, and yeah, you did a good description of him based on my knowledge of him, is so I'm actually about to read a book. Wallace Stegner, a Western author, he wrote a book about him, and then Powell also had his journals or whatever. But one of the main takeaways he had was that the West is dry and can really not support that much agriculture, population, and civilization. So he knew that back in the 1800s. And yet it seems like we're still in denial, and it's that perpetual, endless growth fantasy that is still going on in the West. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, uh, just unchecked growth on a region that has finite resources. It's pretty much the environmental calamity of the entire planet. It's just everything is based on growth. We're at 8.5 billion people on Earth, and most people say we could have a sustainable Earth at 2 billion. And now, the predictions are that there's going to be a mass die off of humans between now and 2120. I mean, to get from 8.5 to 2, that's 6 billion people in 90 years. That's a lot of death. So that should prove something to somebody. Um, Without importing water into the thirsty West, I just don't understand why we're growing at such a fast pace.
Right. Well, I
It
mean,
just
that seems to be the mentality. And I've been looking a little bit more into this. So my focus has been primarily forest ecosystems, but obviously they all it's all the same thing, water and forests and air and everything like that. But so I'm a part of an entity. It's a media outlet that we created in Colorado because our existing media is pretty bad on environmental issues. So it's called Colorado Green Voice. And we ran an article in May that was entitled Colorado River in Peril, Reservoirs Near, quote, brink of collapse. So it's basically talking about all this stuff. It always seems like there's a catastrophe, but it seems as if, yeah, this is going one direction. So do you feel as if there are, let's just say, decision makers, people who are in gatekeepers, say in the media, are they taking this really seriously?
Yeah, I think there's plenty of people that are writing about it, but there's just not a lot of action. Uh, I don't feel that real estate developers are taking it seriously. I don't feel the people that are coming to the Southwest are taking it seriously. It's just, I, I mean, I really don't get it. It's the number one thing you need to stay alive, and it's wantedly wasted half the time.
So my take on the human species is that we are either incapable or unwilling to prevent bad things from happening. All we can do is have bad things happen, get worse and worse, and then we're pretty good at adapting. Do you see what would be a tipping point for reality in the West when it comes to water and drought and overconsumption?
People dying of thirst, and that would be a definite tipping point. Uh, Crops failing is another tipping point. The increase in the intensity, I mean, the heat intensity of the wildfires because things are so dry. We now have fire tornadoes that we never had before, where you get the fires get so hot and then they start spinning, then they tornado up, and then the embers go out for miles and start other fires. So I think the wildfires are a definite announcement that we've reached the tipping point. But until people just start dying, they just don't have a resource. I guess we're not getting the message.
Yeah, it takes that, and sometimes it takes more than that. But I think you might be right. The crop failure, because that impacts economy, that might be an issue. The heat intensity, of course, when things just get so hot, it's ridiculous. I mean, even here, so I'm living in the mountains of Colorado. I'm at 8,500 feet. So I'm northwest of Denver. And Denver is like 95 degrees every day for the whole summer, like,
Yeah.
and more. Up here, it's actually been the hottest summers that people remember ever. The people who've been living up in the mountains for 20 years, the lowest snowpack. That's pretty hard to ignore. But right now, it's just sort of what, annoying, and maybe there's some expenses involved, but it's not been catastrophic. And then when we see the wildfire stuff, of course, the consensus of peer-reviewed science shows that, well, first of all, wildfire is a natural component, but the intensity, increased intensity and severity of wildfire is linked directly to, based on what we know, is heat and drought. So that's aridity, but also long-term drought, and then it can spread with wind. But what the lesson, the fake lesson, which isn't a lesson, we seem to learn, or at least the powers that be learn from wildfires. Oh, we just haven't cut down enough forest. We just have to do more clear cutting. We just have to dry out and heat up the forests and make them windier and reduce the amount of water flow and the water cycle. And they're telling everyone that we need to cut down forests. So I don't think we're learning the lessons of wildfire at all. Here in Colorado, they are, instead of funding measures to protect people's homes, they're funding more logging, and groups like the Nature Conservancy are right now trying to get well, they just got it on the ballot for $85 million more every year for logging in the name of wildfire. So any thoughts on all that?
Well, let's look at a forest. that is devastated by a wildfire. The nutrient content of that forest is still there. It's in the ash, it's laying on the ground. From there, we'll start the new forest. Some the forests are capable of reseeding themselves if they have anything to reseed into. Now, with a clear cut, you removed all the biomass. There's nothing there for the next generation to draw nutritional value from so it can grow. You're removing it. Now, I do think that we could go in the forest and chip down the ladder fuels and leave that on the forest floor. That's what the fire abatement companies do here. They don't take everything out, they put it in a different form. They put it on a mat on the floor. That helps moisture retention. And so clear cutting is not going to accomplish anything. It's just going to make it a deader zone, just a zone of death. I can't believe the Nature Conservancy is going along with this.
Well, they get government contracts to do this stuff. And yeah, I mean, personally, I don't find a lot of validity in what they're doing in the forest at all. I think if they had a lighter touch, people would be less concerned about it. But right now, the vast majority of these so-called projects, which I call schemes that I've been tracking in the forest, are entirely big tree cutting, industrial logging, clear cutting. They're in roadless areas away, furthest away from any communities. They are in old growth forests, endangered species habitat, and we're not focusing on the homes. But tying forests into other ecosystems, we can certainly come back to forests and deserts as well. But you know a lot about chaparral, and you actually wrote a book called Songs of the Chaparral that
Yeah.
you say references several native plants and some bird species. So what even is, oh, looks nice. What even is chaparral? Tell people what chaparral is.
It's a biome that generally occurs around 4,000 feet in elevation, uh, gets about 15 inches of rain a year, while the rest of the nation on average gets 38 inches. You get a lot of cacti and succulents and plants that are adapted to dry weather conditions. And it's just a more arid region. Plant material is generally smaller, more bush-like than tree-like, and is finite too. It can only take so much human development before it's ruined. Um, I had a thought, it was kind of escaping me. um, it's just, it exhibits some of the characteristics of the desert below it by being ungodly hot in summer, and some of the characteristics of the mountains that encircle it by being, by getting snow in winter. But on average, it's drier than other habitats.
Yeah, it's sort of like a interzone between forest, it seems like in either desert or grassland. Though my
Yeah.
understanding, a fair amount of them are converting to grassland because whereas most forests right now have been at a fire deficit, it can be argued that there are some larger fires, there's some higher severity, and there may be more in the future because of climate change. But my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, with chaparral is that it's been burning too much in some cases, and that may be converting it to grasslands. I don't know. Do you know anything about that?
Um, no, not a hell of a lot. I know that um, that what used to be called what forest fires are now called wildfires. And the reason for that is they're not happening in forests all the time anymore. They're happening in edge biomes. They're happening here on the chaparral. Grass burns too, and you're not out of the woods just because you don't have trees. If you're dry, you're dry. And the fires are burning so hot now that they just keep going. Um, I don't know if I answered your question or not.
No, you certainly have. Yeah, I mean, I was looking at a little bit of data on that specific aspect, but also, so the LA, the Los Angeles fires, that was almost primarily in Chaparral and also residential neighborhood. what we're finding is the fastest fires. So those are really the ones that are the biggest threat are in grasslands or chaparral. So the argument is always we haven't cut down enough forests, and it's like that doesn't even apply in this case. In the idea that the reason I brought up the fire thing with chaparral is they're like, oh well, if because of what California is like too protective and they haven't allowed enough management. It's like, well, what management are you going to do in chaparral? It either burns or it isn't burning, and the idea of putting prescribed fire into chaparral, based on my understanding, is excessive because there's already plenty of fire in chaparral. That's why I bring that up.
Yeah, be honest with you, this is the first I've heard of this theory that we're going to be better off by cutting things down and removing them. I want to talk about the Palisades fire that was along the coast of the Pacific Ocean. That ocean on these $1 million beachfront homes was less than a football field away. Salt water will put out a fire. You're saying all our reservoirs are dry. Why not have a dedicated saltwater reservoir system for fire suppression only? Well, the equipment will rust. Well, do you want the equipment to rust, or do you want to lose these $1 million homes that the insurance people are unwilling to cover? Uh, Again, I mean, it comes too expensive not to do something, we'll do it. But I just couldn't believe it when you saw the pictures of those homes just completely devastated, and there's the ocean right there.
It's a great point. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, it's well, what's the saying? Water everywhere and not a drop to drink. It's like, well,
Yeah,
you don't have to drink it. Just spray it.
yeah, Coleridge. You're exactly right. It's just it seems like we have one way of thinking and we just won't come out of the paradigms that exist, and we need creative solutions. I also think that we need to look at climate change, which drought's a major part, as a war. I mean, we're fighting we're fighting in Iran. We're spending money on such stupid things. So a lot of people say, a lot of writers, environmental writers say, if we approach the climate change, thwarting the effects of climate change, with the same sense of urgency that we approach World War II, we could get ahead of this thing, but we just won't. Corporate greed is such that they just won't spend money on the things that are basically going to keep us alive.
I would argue that also because it's a somewhat invisible enemy, you can't
Yeah.
just point a finger at a foreign government or something like that. But I think you're totally right. We have to look at things differently. There is these blinders I've noticing elected officials I engage with. I'm trying to come up with this analogy. It's not a very good one, so bear with me. Basically, like they have a head, and then there's like little slots in their head for information, and there's they have a shape of like a square basically. So as long as it fits in with the square, it's fine. But if it's star shaped, it's circle, if it's triangle, it just doesn't fit in. They just won't take new information, and in fact, they find it as a threat and hostile because they have a predetermined agenda. But writing, so books, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, that can often break that pattern because it goes deep, it questions, it can take people through stories and places and characters. So tell us a little bit more about your books and your writing. I'm a writer as well, fiction and nonfiction. So tell us a little bit more about your process with that and how you feel as if you do agree with me that books can change people's minds.
Well, the thing about books is people need to read them, so they have to be interesting. I think T.C. Boyle has done more to help the environmental movement than a lot of scientists because he writes interesting fiction. He wrote A Friend of the Earth back in 2000, and he just got done writing Blue Skies in 2024. Well, a lot of his predictions in A Friend of the Earth were coming true in Blue Skies. It wasn't just fiction. But I think you got to, if you're going to write a story after the Drought's fiction, because it has to be interesting. You have to get people to read all the way through it to get to absorb the message. Now, in nonfiction, there's you just have to appeal to people's sense of humanity. One of the problems with the politicians, I know I'm backing up a little, is the length of election cycles. They only care about issues that will be issues during their term. And they want to look like they're solving problems or taking action or helping people. So that's what they concentrate on. So anything out in the future is not really getting much attention from them. And it's just, I don't know what to say about that. They're the people that make the laws. They're the people um, that are supposed to be doing something, but they don't see the necessity to. Climate change denial is the identity of the American Republican Party. So if 70 million people are voting for Donald Trump, that's a lot of climate change denial still. And I really don't know how to defeat that. I like to say America is always reactive, but never preventative. And, it's never time to do the job right, but always time to do the job over. And
Right. Well,
until there's a paradigm shift in our thinking, uh, I think things could get better environmentally just by reduction in population, and it's going to have to happen. You can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. So population is going to go down, which will help some of the problems right there. I mean, most people say the one thing you can do more than anything else to help this environmental thing is have one less or no children. Sorry to say, we are the species that's consuming everything.
yeah, I mean that's a fact. It's a really difficult topic because what is the strongest human drive besides consumption? It's consumption and reproduction. So these are the two strongest human drives. And so yeah, I'm always trying to think of ways to address that. And for me, that's writing. It's really difficult for me to say, put out a simple campaign thing addressing that. I don't feel like a campaign can necessarily address that. But when we write books, we can get into those topics, those deeper topics. And have you explored, how have you explored some of these themes in your writing?
Well, when I say there needs to be a paradigm shift, do you remember the Roosevelt era Civilian Conservation Corps, the
I
CCC?
don't remember it, but I know of it.
Okay, it was in existence from 1935 to 1943. It was called the Tree Army.
Mhm.
Well, I've been saying for the last 3 decades, let's bring back the CCC, but let's make it a branch of the military. Let's say, okay, this is an issue of national security. So we'll give these guys the same benefits we give our military. It'll be looked at as a non-gun toting branch of the military that has a job to do. And their job is environmental restoration. Uh, let's look at AI. I hate to think about AI. If it's going to take a lot of jobs, what's going to be left? Manual labor? Well, then it's going to be a young person's world. Uh, but just the same, you have to have something from the Labor Act. Get the CC up and running. Get your strong young men in there and start doing projects that actually help the environment. And so I just think there needs to be more action. I feel like, yeah, I write. I preach to the choir. Is the biggest um, critique I get. You're saying these things to the people that already know them. Well, I just I try to be simple enough in my writing to appeal to the common man, the man in the street. Don't try to talk down to him. Try to reach him on some level because there's a hell of a lot more common men than there are environmentalists. So a little bit of action by millions will outdo a lot of action by thousands. So if you can just get through to them on anything, just one action is better than no action. And I don't know. I just don't know how anybody can look at what's going on and say, well, climate change is a hoax. The Earth has been through this before. No, it hasn't. The apothecary is record levels of extinction above the baseline rate. We've never seen anything like this before. It's particularly our species. It's only, been on the planet, in a present form, 500,000 years. Well, that's just a little blip on the radar screen of time. I also like to say that the Earth doesn't need Homo sapiens. It'll do fine. It's something. Some life will come out of whatever happens, uh, and then we'll just, I don't know. Somebody visits the planet 5,000 years from now and says there's an intelligent species here, but they just couldn't handle technology. They let it get out of control. We used to have the atom bomb, and I would say we are the only species on Earth that's devised a method by which to eradicate itself. Well, now we have two. The AI bros are all warning about the dangers of AI as they simultaneously push it forward. Keep going in, passing borders and boundaries where they don't really know what's going to happen. My biggest question is, what do I need to survive? Second biggest question is, what kind of quality of life do I want? What and now at 75 is, what kind of life do I want for the people that I'm leaving behind? And just the priorities are all wrong. They're all wrong, and they're either going to change or we're doomed. And I can't believe we're doomed. I just can't accept it.
So yeah, a few things here. So first of all, yeah, I mean, climate change, huge threat, climate crisis, climate chaos. Keep in mind that we've been having ecological crises before climate change. So climate change is an intensifier of the existing one. So even if we solved climate change, which doesn't seem like we're really even trying to, we've still got overconsumption, all the other issues, air, water, land pollution, species extinction. So yeah, climate change is that intensifier and central to everything. But yeah, we've got multi prongs of this. And then I guess the one thing that people were claiming you're preaching to the choir. So the thing I don't like about that statement is that's what organizing is. Like you have to find the people who share common values, and then another, this is a more violent metaphor, is it's you're passing out ammunition to the choir. And so maybe passing out shovels, we could have a more peaceful analogy. But so I wouldn't allow people to dismiss your work as that. The people who are going to be most on your side are the people that you want to be like, okay, what are we going to do about this? And I think we can generally inform and educate people. But what I've learned from organizing is it's only a small percentage of people that actually want to do anything, and the rest of the people will just stand on the sidelines and follow. So
The 80-20 rule.
that's right.
All right.
So
Yeah,
I think it's completely legit to focus on folks who might be interested. I mean, I'm trying other tactics. I write eco horror fiction, so I try to bring in maybe just readers of horror, which could be across the political spectrum of views and values. Cool, interesting story, and I'm contributing some information and science and maybe ideology around that. But most of the people who are going to read my stuff, if it's eco horror, they're going to be drawn in because they care about these issues. Then the question is, does that motivate people? And so, yeah, let me ask you that question. So things like, what was the movie that came out a while ago? Avatar is about protecting nature and stuff like that. I know people who are like, oh, if we could just get this book turned into a movie, everyone would act. Do you feel as if art, or particularly even cinema, does that actually cause people to take action, or what do you think about that as a motivator?
I think a lot of these movies cause people to be entertained while they're in the theater, and then they just go back to their lives. I three documentaries that are out now, uh, Kiss the Ground and Groundswell, that Woody Harrelson is supporting Rosario Dawson about regenerative agriculture, which I have some thoughts on. It sounds great, but in 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 we just got to get people to do it. You got to get people to do it. And the thing about regenerative ag, get a cover crop on the ground. then turn it into the soil, build your soil fertility, restore your agricultural soils. Well, this grosses people out. But how about natural burials? How about human composting? You got 6 billion people that are supposedly going to die in 90 years. That's a lot of bodies. That's a lot of nutrient contact that could be put back in the soil. But no, you got a death industry. You got to have a celebration of a life. That drives me crazy. These celebrations of a life. Why didn't we celebrate while they were alive? I mean, you're dead, you're dead. But there's still something you could do for future generations, and that's contribute to one thing you have, which is your body. Um, I think we have to restore the Earth's agricultural soils to keep the species alive. But again, the biggest thing that's going to change everything or make it better is less people. And you have to convince people of that. I mean, if you have one kid in your family, you can afford to do more than if you have three kids in your family. You just can. It's just simple economics. If you can appeal to people on that front, then that'll work.
So, well, you definitely gave me an idea for a new eco horror story because I'm aware of regenerative agriculture and I'm aware of green burial. I have not thought of combining the two together. So
Yeah, well,
interesting.
they all say, well, you got to get the cover crop. Well, I know this. Uh, the more fertile that soil, the faster that cover crop's going to establish. And then you can start doing the rotations that they're talking about. I could recommend one movie. You might want to watch this Groundswell. Uh, it's a pretty good movie. Um, I mean, everything, just the way we approach agriculture, massive inputs of fertilizer, massive inputs of pesticides, huge in all of the, if there's through all of that, we were breeding crops that could resist the pesticides that we shouldn't even have to put them on in the first place. But the nutritional value of the food we're growing now is not nearly what it was with the heirloom crops. What these crops are bred from were much more nutritious than what we have now. Uh, our food is a major problem.
So what is the definition of regenerative agriculture as opposed to commercial agriculture? What's the difference?
First thing I would say is uh, a moratorium on pesticides, moratorium on chelated fertilizers that get into the water supply. Um, it they rotate livestock into defined paddocks, keep them there for a while, then move them into another paddock. The feces from the livestock is the fertilizer that's provided. Now I'm saying you might not have enough feces, but if you had compost, same thing. First of all, raise the fertility level naturally. Do not use chemicals of any kind, pesticides or fertilizers. Uh, and then you establish a cover crop. You leave the cover crop on the ground and you seed drill through it. You don't do tillage anymore. You slit the soil, put the seeds in, but you disturb as little as possible. Get a natural cover, disturb it as little as possible, let the crops come up through it. Now, harvesting is more difficult. When I bring that up, they don't like to hear it. It is, but it's just, you just got to keep the soil from washing and blowing away. And then you have to find ways to improve it naturally. And then you can support your crops.
So the tie-in that I was making in my mind with my eco horror, because I write this stuff, yeah, I write it to entertain, I write it to scare because I'm a little twisted, but also because I am trying to communicate information to people. And what's funny about the concept of something called folk horror, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but recent movies, something called Midsummer, The Wicker Man. So basically, what it is, it's to do with typically the same theme, and it's often fertility cults. So ritual sacrifice for fertility. And so there's lots of stuff where it's kind of like returning the bodies to the land, right? So that's the story there. But you trace that symbolically back through cultures that did have those cults. Basically, the idea was, yeah, okay, we probably shouldn't be killing people and throwing them in the soil, but the idea is that we have to give something back. We can't just take. Nature doesn't work without it. And to me, that's the underlying theme of that folk horror is like if you just take and take and take from nature, it will either not provide for you, or in the case of these, trumped up horror stuff, it'll come after you. But if you give back in some way, and so yeah, green burial is one way, or like you're saying, composting or other feces and stuff like that. So that's what that got me thinking about. And that might be the story that I end up writing based on what you just inspired.
There's the earth has finite resources. Everything's in a cycle. And if resources that plants could grow from are being used by our bodies, then the plants are at a deficit. And the only way to change that is to take our bodies and put them back into the ground for the plants to use. And, people are gross. I'd like to recommend a book if anybody that's watching. It's Our Last Best Act by Mallory McDuff. And she examines all of this, the funeral industry. Um, she's going for a natural burial. I want to go to be composted. I honestly want to be composted. It's the last thing I can do for the planet. Um, but it just has to be a huge shift in our thinking. But again, there's only so much to go around, and you have to use it wisely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as far as horror is concerned, the whole thing is a horror story.
Well, for
The way
sure.
I look at it.
Yeah, I'm just doing journalism basically, but I got to put it under a category. But it's funny. I try not to pitch my writing too much on this podcast, but I will once in a while. And I'm just going to mention this because of how crazily this ties into exactly what you're saying. So just a self promotion here. People know I don't do this a lot. Josh's worst nightmare.substack.com. I put out different kinds of fiction every week for free, stories, two-sentence horror stories, and my books are there. But I write a eco horror haiku, and I
Yeah,
just this was the eco horror haiku that I just published this Wednesday. I'll just read it because it's a haiku and it fits in. So, dig in the garden. Why is the soil packed so loose? Shovel clinks, old bones. So basically, somebody did a green burial in my little haiku. And obviously, I'm sensationalizing it. It's a dark
yeah,
thing. But you're suggesting let's accept death, accept the organic nutrients that are in our body, and return it to the soil.
yeah, exactly. There- when you're dead, you're dead. I just, I'm not into all this mysticism and all that. You know, I don't know if there's a heaven or a hell. I'm not big on religion, but the one thing I'm big on is the one thing I believe is there's good in this world and there's evil in this world. And good will have to prevail if humanity, Homo sapiens, are to survive as a species. And I think preserving the planet that sustains you is good. Um, we live pretty well in the U.S., but I mean, there's people all over the world. There's climate refugees already, and they're not doing well. And a lot of Europe and even our country now, it's no immigrants. Keep the immigrants out. Uh, I don't want to go too far into that, but why are we closing the door? Because we feel we don't have enough ourselves. And other countries feel the same way. Well, that's great, but suppose you're the person that the door is closed on. How are you going to survive?
These are the discussions we need to have. Sobering, uncomfortable, but necessary. And yeah, the Green Root podcast, we're looking at root causes. And that's why we want to talk about all this stuff. And that's why it's been great to have you on. I appreciate your writing and your perspective. So the last question I like to ask people is what do they feel is a root cause? Because there might be many of at least an aspect of the eco crisis, maybe the eco crisis itself. So, what do you think?
Corporate greed, hands down, corporate greed. Now think about a corporation. This is another one of my pet lines. What would you expect from an invented business entity that's given human-like qualities, except to say it doesn't have a beating heart and it never dies? It's just a profit-driven period, no matter what. Make a profit. And until that paradigm shifts, I don't think anything's going to shift. I think you got to outlaw the corporate business structure. There needs to be more accountability. And what the heads of corporations are making above the worker bees in the corporation is obscene. I think 15 times the lowest salary in the Pueblo would be fine. That's still a lot of money to live on. But corporate greed, the billionaire class, you probably saw an inconvenient truth where Gore shows a picture of Lady Justice, got the earth on one side of the scale, and you got gold bars on the other. And he says, well, these guys are selecting the gold bars because most of them feel like they're going to be dead before it gets really bad. Not a lot of altruism in that, but that's the truth. It's just money, money, money.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. And so the last thing is, where can people find you, unless you don't want to be found, or your
I
work?
want to be found in the worst way. I'm on Substack. I have a Trutella author website, https://johnchristopherkriegBooks.com. It's up there on the wall. Well, yeah, it's there. Good. Uh, yeah, I got on Substack because I wanted to get a little bit of publicity for our environmental awakening. It should be out in September. I've written a series of essays, memoir essays called The Arc, The Life of a Landscape Architect. And I also have a young adult picture book, Luke, the Legendary Bloodhound. It's about walking this dog through nature. But all of those are on the website, the Trutella website. And, I'm posting a lot of free posts on Substack. I don't do teasers. Like, I don't go on and say, give a little bit of a teaser and say, well, then go to my paid post. If I write a paid post, it's an entirely different subject. I don't like teasers, but that's where I'm at to answer your question.
Great. And yeah, we'll have the links available, and folks should go subscribe to his Substack, comment on it, share, and buy his books. Yeah, really appreciate the work you're doing. And I haven't read your books yet, but I do plan to. They're on the list now. So thank you for all your contributions, and thanks for coming on the Green Root podcast.
Thank you.